The planet was colder than anything the alien woman had ever known. She had never felt such bitter winds, such unrelenting frost. Her body, delicate and thin, wasn't made for these conditions. The icy winds cut through her skin like sharp knives. Her species, the Calorians, were known for their beauty and grace, but also for their weakness in the face of extreme cold. They thrived in warmer climates, and this frozen world was not meant for them. Her name was Lyra, and she had been walking for what felt like days, her legs growing weaker with each step. Her breath came out in ragged clouds, and every part of her ached from the cold. She had hoped to find shelter in one of the small colonies scattered across the icy plains, but it seemed like no one was willing to help. Every door she knocked on, every settlement she came across, offered nothing but cold stares and slammed doors. Lyra's thoughts were becoming foggy. She wasn't sure how much longer she could survive out here alone. The Kellerians were a proud species, but in moments like this she realized just how fragile they truly were. She was desperate for warmth, for food, for kindness. She knocked on the door of another small building, this one made of dark metal. The door creaked open just a crack, and a pair of eyes peered out, barely visible through the thin slit. "Please, I'm cold." "I need help," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible above the howling wind. The person inside looked her over, eyes filled with suspicion. Without saying a word, they quickly closed the door. Lyra slumped against the wall, her hands shaking. She had tried so many times, and every time she had been turned away. It seemed like no one cared about her species, or about the cold that was slowly stealing her life away. She staggered to her feet and began walking again. There was nowhere left to go, no one else to turn to. She wondered if she would make it through the night, or if she would simply fade away into the cold. But then, as she trudged on through the snow, she saw something different. A small house, standing alone on the edge of the frozen wasteland. Its lights were on, and smoke rose from a chimney. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was a sign of life. She approached the door cautiously, unsure whether she would face the same cold rejection she had met elsewhere. Taking a deep breath, Lyra raised her hand and knocked softly. She waited. The wind howled around her, but there was only silence from inside the house. Her heart sank. Maybe this time, too, she would be turned away. Just as she was about to turn and leave, the door creaked open. A man stood there, a human, dressed in a thick coat and worn boots. His eyes were warm and kind, something Lyra had not seen in a long time. The human looked at her for a moment, then stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in," he said. His voice calm and inviting. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She had never been greeted like this before. Most humans, she had been told, were afraid of her kind, of her people. The Calorians had always been seen as mysterious and dangerous, and yet this man did not seem afraid at all. Instead, he offered her a place inside. She didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, her legs almost giving out as she crossed the threshold. The warmth of the house washed over her, and she almost collapsed in relief. The human helped her inside, his hands gentle and steady. "Thank you," Lyra whispered, tears of gratitude filling her eyes. She had no idea who this man was or why he had helped her, but she was beyond thankful. For the first time in what felt like forever, she was warm. The man didn't speak immediately. He closed the door behind her and gestured for her to sit by the fire. The flames crackled, casting a soft glow across the room. It was small but cozy. There was simple wooden furniture and a few personal items scattered about, nothing fancy. But everything seemed to have its place. The human seemed content with his quiet life, and Lyra couldn't help but wonder why someone like him was living alone on a planet like this. "Are you all right?" the man asked, his voice gentle. He crouched down beside her, his eyes studying her face. Lyra nodded, though her body was still trembling. I don't know how much longer I could have lasted out there," she admitted softly. The man nodded, understanding the unspoken words. "You're safe now. You'll warm up soon." Lyra's eyes filled with gratitude, but she knew she couldn't stay forever. She was an alien, a stranger in his home. He had already done so much for her. I didn't mean to intrude, she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. I just... I didn't know where else to go. The man smiled, a small but reassuring smile. You're not intruding. Everyone needs help sometimes. You can stay as long as you need. Lyra looked at him, stunned by his words. It was as if he understood something she hadn't even said. She had been wandering for so long, thinking she was alone, that she almost didn't believe it. She had expected the worst, but instead, this human had opened his door to her without hesitation. Her mind began to settle as the warmth of the fire seeped into her bones. She didn't know what the future would hold, but for now, she was safe. And that, for the moment, was all that mattered. Lyra sat by the fire, the warmth slowly returning to her frozen body. She hadn't realized how cold she had been until now. The crackling of the flames was the only sound in the room, and for the first time in days, she felt a sense of peace. The human, who had introduced himself as Jack, busied himself around the small room. He added more wood to the fire, then brought over a blanket and gently draped it over her shoulders. Lyra shivered slightly, not from the cold, but from the unexpected kindness. I'd not known such generosity from anyone in a long time. People only saw her as an outsider and alien to be feared or ignored, but not Jack. He simply treated her as a guest, no different than any other human. Do you need anything else? Jack asked as he sat down across from her, keeping a safe distance. Lyra shook her head. No, this is enough. More than enough, she replied, her voice softer than she had intended. Jack smiled and nodded, understanding that words couldn't quite express the gratitude she felt. He didn't pressure her to speak. Instead, he seemed content to let the silence stretch between them, allowing Lyra time to adjust to her new surroundings. She looked around the small, cozy cabin there. Were no fancy decorations, just the essentials. A worn rug on the floor, simple furniture, and shelves filled with books and tools. It wasn't much, but there was something comforting about its simplicity. I've never met anyone like you before, Jack said after a moment, his voice breaking the silence. Where are you from? Lyra hesitated. She had to be careful. Telling him about her people could lead to questions she wasn't ready to answer. The Calorians had been at war with many species for years, and though Jack seemed kind, there was still the risk that he might turn against her if he knew to. I'm from a distant world, she said, choosing her words carefully. A world far from here. Jack nodded, but he seemed to sense the reluctance in her voice. You don't have to tell me everything. I just wanted to know who you are. Lyra's heart warmed at his understanding. My name is Lyra, she said quietly, her gaze dropping to the floor. I'm just someone who got lost. Someone who needed help. Jack leaned back in his chair, his gaze softening. Well, you found help, he said, and I'm glad you came here. I don't get many visitors, especially not ones from far-off worlds. Lyra felt a flicker of something hope, perhaps that she hadn't felt in a long time. The warmth of the fire, the kindness of this human was a strange feeling, but it was the first time in days she had felt safe. Her mind wandered too. The journey that had brought her here. She had come to this frozen world to escape the endless battles, to escape a life of violence and conflict. But the cold had drained her, and now she found herself here, in this small cabin, with a man who had offered her warmth and shelter without asking for anything in return. You're kind, Lyra said softly, looking up at Jack. He chuckled softly. I've heard that before, he said with a grin. But you seem surprised. You'd be surprised how much kindness is still out there, even in places like this. Lyra wasn't sure what to say to that. She had seen little kindness in her. Life, only fear and anger from others. The galaxy was a vast and dangerous place, and her species had been fighting for survival for as long as she could remember. To find someone who didn't see her as a threat or a burden was surprising, but perhaps there was more to humans than she had been taught. Perhaps, she thought, humans were not so different from her people after all. What do you do here? Lyra asked, trying to change the subject. I mean, on this planet? Why are you living here alone? Jack's expression softened as he leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. I came here years ago, he said, his voice quieter. Now I needed a change of pace. Earth. It wasn't the right place for me anymore. So I came here to escape the chaos. Lyra nodded, understanding that feeling all too well. It must be lonely, she said softly. Jack's gaze met hers, and for a moment there was a long silence between them. It can be, but I've learned to enjoy the quiet, and now I have a guest, he said, offering a small smile. Someone to share the quiet with. Lyra smiled back, a rare, genuine smile. She wasn't used to feeling this welcome, at peace, and with someone who didn't expect anything from her. It was a strange but welcome change. Thank you for helping me, Lyra said again, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know how to repay you. Jack shook his head. There's no need to repay me. It's the least I could do. Everyone deserves kindness, especially when they're far from home. Lyra felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had always been taught to be strong, to fight for her survival, but in this moment, she realized that sometimes strength wasn't about fighting. Sometimes strength was about accepting help when it was offered. The night stretched on, and Jack went about his evening routine, preparing a small meal for both of them. Lyra ate in silence, savoring the warmth of the food and the feeling of being cared for. She had forgotten what it was like to feel safe, to feel like she wasn't just surviving, but living. As the night grew deeper and the fire crackled softly, Lyra couldn't help but wonder what the future held. She had been wandering for so long, never knowing where she would end up, and now here she was, with Jack in his little cabin on a frozen world. She didn't know how long she could stay, but for the first time in ages, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe there was a chance for her to find peace, to find a place where she truly belonged. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps this small, quiet life with Jack might be the answer she had been searching for all along. Days passed, and Lyra grew stronger. The warmth from the fire and the care from Jack slowly healed the pain in her body. She spent her days sitting by the fire, sipping hot drinks, and listening to Jack's stories about his life on this frozen world. She could hardly believe how different it was from her own life, one filled with battles and the constant fight for survival. Here in the quiet of Jack's cabin, there were no wars, no fear. Felt like a dream. Jack never asked to. Many questions. He seemed content to let Lyra tell her story when she was ready. And though she often stayed quiet about her past, she felt no pressure. She was starting to trust him, something she hadn't done in a long time. He treated her like an equal, not like an alien or a stranger. He was kind, understanding, and patient. Lyra spent a lot of time thinking about what she wanted to do next. Her people had been scattered, lost to the endless wars they had fought. She had come to this planet to escape, to find peace, but she didn't know what peace looked like anymore. Maybe it was here, in Jack's quiet world. Maybe she could leave her past behind and start fresh. But part of her felt the weight of her responsibility to her people. She couldn't forget them, no matter how much she wanted to. One evening, Jack invited her to join him for a walk outside. The air was cold, but the sky was clear, and the stars shone brightly above them. Lyra was hesitant at first. She wasn't used to being outside in such harsh conditions. But Jack insisted, and soon they were walking side by side, the snow crunching beneath their boots. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Jack said, looking up at the sky. Lyra nodded, though she was still getting used to the endless whiteness of the world around her. Everything seemed so quiet, so still. "Yes, it is. I've never seen a sky like this." They walked in silence for a while, and Lyra couldn't help but notice how comfortable she felt beside Jack. He wasn't saying much, but his presence was calming. She had been alone for so long, even among her own people. She had been trained to be strong, to fight, to survive. But now, with Jack, she didn't feel the need to prove anything. She could just be herself. Jack finally broke the silence. "So, tell me more about your world," he said, his voice gentle. "What was it like before you came here?" Lyra took a deep breath, her thoughts drifting back to her home planet. Her people had once been united, strong in their culture and beliefs. But as time went on, they had become divided. Wars, power struggles, and the constant push for more territory had torn them apart. It had always been about survival. But she had never thought survival would mean this running away to a cold, an empty planet hiding from everything she had known. It was beautiful, Lyra began slowly. The trees were tall, the skies were always clear. We had peace for a time, but it didn't last. Our people became too focused on power, on conquering others. Soon, there was only fighting. Endless fighting. I never wanted that. I just wanted to live. Jack listened quietly, his face thoughtful. Interrupt. Just let her speak. Lyra appreciated that. She didn't need advice or pity. She just needed someone to hear her. The fighting, it never ends, Lyra continued. I had to leave. I couldn't stay in that world anymore. But even here, even on this cold planet, I still feel the weight of what I've lost. Jack stopped walking and turned to face her. You don't have to carry that weight alone, Lyra, he said softly. I'm here, but I don't care where you came from. I care about who you are now. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected such honesty, such kindness. She had been taught to distrust others, to always keep her guard up. But Jack's words were different. They didn't come from a place of pity or fear. He meant them truly. Thank you, Lyra whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She looked away, unable to meet his gaze. She was afraid that if she did, the tears she had been holding back would fall. She had spent so much of her life running from her feelings, running from the truth. But here, in Jack's presence, she felt safe enough to feel. Jack didn't say anything more. Instead, he reached out and gently touched her shoulder, offering a silent comfort. It was enough. Lyra didn't need anything else. Not right now. They walked back to the cabin, the silence between them no longer uncomfortable. It felt natural, like they had known each other for much longer than just a few days. Lyra couldn't remember the last time she had felt so at ease, so unburdened. Back inside, Jack made them a simple meal. Lyra ate, though she wasn't very hungry. Her mind kept returning to the conversation they had had outside. For the first time in years, she felt like she wasn't alone. She didn't know what the future held. But for the first time since she had arrived on this cold planet, she didn't feel like she was just surviving. She was living. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The next few days passed in much the same way. Lyra and Jack shared simple moments working together to fix things around the cabin, talking about their pasts, or sitting in comfortable silence. Lyra learned more about Jack's life on the planet. He had come here alone, hoping to find peace, just as she had. His reasons for being here were different from hers, but their journeys had somehow brought them together as the days grew colder and the nights longer. Lyra's feelings for Jack grew deeper. She had never expected to find someone like him, someone who saw her not as an alien or a stranger, but as a person, someone who needed help, just like anyone else. She knew she couldn't stay with him forever. She had her own people to consider, her own responsibilities. But for now, she allowed herself to enjoy the warmth of his company, the peace she had found in his quiet world, and for the first time in a long time, Lyra allowed herself to hope. Hope for something better, something beyond the endless struggle and pain she had known. Perhaps this small cabin, this simple life, could be her new beginning. And maybe, just maybe, she could find a place where she truly belonged. The days seemed to blend together, a peaceful rhythm settling into the quiet life that Lyra shared with Jack. The cold was still harsh outside. Inside the small cabin, there was warmth, not just from the fire, but from the connection between them. Lyra had never felt so at peace. For the first time in her life, she was no longer running, no longer trying to escape. She was simply living, enjoying the calmness that Jack's presence brought. But the quiet, simple life they had built was soon to be interrupted. It was a late evening when the change began. Lyra had been sitting by the fire, her thoughts drifting. As Jack worked in the other room, the wind howled outside, a reminder of the world beyond the warmth of the cabin. But then something caught her attention, something she couldn't explain. A strange feeling, like a distant vibration, a pressure in the air. She stood up, looking out the window. At first she saw nothing but the endless stretch of snow and ice. But as her eyes scanned the horizon, she saw it two bright lights in the distance, moving fast. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. The lights were unmistakable. Ships. Alien ships. Her mind raced. She knew what this meant. Her people, her fleet. They had come. The cold, distant world that Jack had made his home had been noticed. And now, it seemed her people had found her. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear, to never face them again. But that was impossible. Her people had tracked her down. And no matter how far she ran, they would never let her go. She turned quickly, searching for Jack. He was still in the other room, unaware of the ships that were rapidly approaching. Lyra's stomach twisted. She couldn't tell him the truth, not yet. She had to figure out what to do. Jack walked into the room, wiping his hands on a cloth. He smiled when he saw her standing by the window, her expression serious. "What's wrong?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Lyra turned to face him, her heart pounding. She opened her mouth to speak, but hesitated. Should she tell him? Should she trust him with the truth? She didn't want to scare him. She didn't want to drag him into her world. "Lyra?" Jack asked again, sensing her fear. "There's something out there," Lyra said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "My people... They've come. I didn't expect them to find me here, but now they're coming for me." Jack's face softened with confusion. "What do you mean? Your people?" Lyra took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I'm not like the humans. I'm Calorian. My people are not kind. They've been at war with many species, and they won't stop until they have what they want. I thought I could escape, but now they've found me." Jack looked out the window, his eyes narrowing as he saw the ships growing larger in the sky. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at the approaching fleet, his mind racing. Lyra watched him closely, unsure of what to say next. He'd turn away from her now? Would he be afraid? Finally, Jack turned back to her, his face serious, but not filled with fear. "You don't have to face this alone," he said, his voice firm. "Not going to let them take you." Lyra's eyes widened in surprise. You... You would help me?" "Of course," Jack said. "You've helped me already. I'm not going to let your past catch up with you. We'll figure this out together." Lyra's heart swelled with gratitude. She hadn't expected Jack to understand, hadn't expected him to stand by her side after everything she had told him. But here he was, offering his help without hesitation. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "You don't know what this means to me." "I do know," Jack replied, his eyes steady and unwavering. "You're not just some stranger, Lyra. You're my friend. And I'm not going to let anyone hurt you." Lyra smiled, the fear in her heart slowly easing. She had never expected to find someone like Jack, someone who would stand by her, no matter the cost. But now, in this moment, she realized that maybe she wasn't alone after all. The ships were closer now, their engines rumbling through the air, sending a deep vibration through the ground. Lyra could feel the weight of their arrival. Her people, powerful and ruthless, would not let her go easily. She knew they would demand her return, and they would not accept any refusal. They would destroy anything and anyone in their path. "Jack," Lyra said, her voice urgent. "They won't stop until they have me. You need to get out of here. They will take you too, if they find you." Jack shook his head. "I'm not going anywhere." Lyra wanted to argue, to protect him, but she knew it was useless. Jack had made up his mind. And for the first time since she had arrived on this planet, Lyra realized that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the only one fighting for survival. Jack was fighting too, fighting for her. She took a deep breath. "Then we stand together, face them together." Jack nodded. Together. As the ships finally landed in the distance, their dark shapes looming against the night sky, Lyra felt a surge of determination. She had run long enough. It was time to face her past. She wouldn't do it alone. The ships hovered in the air, casting dark shadows over the snow-covered landscape. Now the cold winds blew fiercely, but Lyra felt no chill. The warmth of Jack's presence beside her was all she needed to focus on what lay ahead. The approaching fleet was a reminder of her past she had tried so hard to leave behind. Lyra took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She could feel the weight of her people's expectations pressing on her chest. They would not forgive her for leaving. They would not understand why she had chosen to walk away. Yet, here she stood, ready to face them, with Jack by her side. "You don't have to do this," Jack said, his voice low but steady. "We can leave. We can run." Lyra shook her head. "I can't run anymore. They will find me no matter where I go. It's time to face them." Jack stepped closer to her, his expression filled with concern. "But I don't want you to face them alone. You don't have to do this for me." Lyra turned to him, her eyes meeting his with a look of determination. "I don't know if I can stop them, but I won't let them hurt you. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever, hope. And for that, I will stand with you." Jack's eyes softened, and he nodded. He had come to care for Lyra in ways he never expected. She wasn't just some alien from another world. She was a person, someone who had endured hardships far greater than he could ever imagine. And now, she was standing at a crossroads, a choice between the past she had been trying to escape and the future she could build here. "With him, you won't be alone," Jack said, his voice firm. "I'm with you, Lyra. We face this together." Lyra felt a small smile tug at her lips. The warmth she had felt from Jack was not just physical, it was real, deep in her heart. She had never imagined a human could be so selfless, so kind. In this moment, Jack had become more than just a friend. He was someone she could trust with her life, but there was still so much uncertainty. What would her people want from her? Would they demand her return? Would they force her to leave everything behind once again? A soft rumble from the approaching ships broke her thoughts. They were close now, landing not far from the cabin. The ground trembled slightly beneath her. Lyra's heart raced, but she kept her focus. The time for hiding was over. It was time to face the consequences of her choices. "Lyra," Jack said, gently placing a hand on her shoulder, "whatever happens, know that I won't let them take you away." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with emotion. "Want to leave, but I don't know if I can stop them." Jack took a step back, taking in a deep breath. "We'll find a way. Together." Just then, the door to the cabin opened, and the sound of boots crunching on snow reached their ears. Lyra turned to see a group of figures emerging from the darkness. They were tall, imposing, their eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight.
There!
Leader, a woman with sharp features and silver-gray skin, stepped forward. Lyra's heart sank as she recognized her. This was Captain Eliana, one of the highest-ranking officers in the Calorian fleet. Eliana had been a mentor to Lyra before. She had left. But now, her eyes were cold, unfeeling. "Lyra," Captain Eliana called, her voice carrying across the quiet night. "Ah, you have returned. We've been searching for you. Your people demand your return." Lyra's heart twisted. She knew what. This meant, if she returned with Eliana, she would be forced back into the war, back into a life she had escaped from. There would be no freedom, no peace, just endless fighting, endless pain. "I'm not going back," Lyra said, her voice steady. Despite the turmoil inside her, Eliana raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. "You have no choice. You are one of us. You belong with your people, Lyra. Come with us now, and we will forgive your defection." Lyra shook her head. "No, I belong here with Jack. I've chosen my path. I'm not going back to a life of war." Jack stepped forward, standing beside Lyra. "She's not going with you. Not without a fight." Eliana's gaze shifted to Jack, her eyes narrowing. "A human. You are foolish to stand against the Kylorian fleet. You do not know what you are up against." Jack stood tall, unafraid. "Maybe I don't, but I know Lyra, and she's not going anywhere with you." The tension in the air was thick. Eliana's soldiers stood in a line waiting for their captain's orders. Lyra could feel the weight of their eyes on her, judging her, waiting for her to make the decision. But she had already made it. "I will not go with you," Lyra said again, her voice firm. Eliana's expression faltered for a moment, as if surprised by Lyra's resolve. "You are a fool, Lyra," she said, her voice cold. "You will regret this." "I've made my choice," Lyra replied. "I'll never regret it." Eliana looked to her soldiers, then back to Lyra. "Very well. But know this, we will not forget your defection. You are now an enemy to the Kylorian fleet." With a final glance, Eliana turned and signaled to her soldiers. They began to retreat, leaving the cabin and stepping back into the shadows. Lyra watched them go, her heart heavy but relieved. She had made her choice, and for the first time in years, she felt as though she had control over her own fate. She had chosen Jack, chosen peace over war, and now she would live with the consequences. But for the first time in a long time, she felt free. As the last of the soldiers disappeared into the darkness, Jack stepped beside her once more. "You did it?" he said softly. Lyra nodded, her eyes still fixed on the empty space where the Kylorians had stood. "I did it," she whispered, "and I'm not going back." Jack smiled, a sense of pride in his eyes. "We'll face whatever comes next, together." Lyra looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. She had never imagined she would find someone like Jack, someone who would stand by her side no matter what. Together, they would face whatever came their way. For the first time in years, Lyra allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had found a place where she truly belonged. The night stretched on, leaving an eerie quiet in the air. The Kylorian fleet had left. Eliana and her soldiers had gone, their presence slowly fading into the distance. But the silence remained, heavy with the weight of what had just happened. Lyra and Jack stood side by side, staring into the dark sky, the cold wind still biting at their skin. Lyra felt a strange sense of relief, but also uncertainty. She had made her decision, but she knew there would be consequences. Eliana had made it clear that she was now an enemy of the Kylorian fleet. There would be no going back. There would be no peace for her, at least not from her people. But here, with Jack, she felt something different, something she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt safe. For the first time since leaving her home, she was no longer running. She wasn't hiding. She was standing still, in the company of someone who had shown her kindness, who had offered her a chance to live outside of the endless cycle of war. Lyra took a deep breath, her gaze drifting back to the small cabin behind them. It wasn't much, just a simple home surrounded by snow and ice, but it had become everything to her. It was a place where she could be herself without fear, without hiding. "Jack," Lyra said, her voice steady but full of emotion. "Don't know what will happen next. I don't know if they'll come back for me." Jack turned to her, his eyes full of determination. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together," he said, his voice firm. "You're not alone." Lyra smiled at him, grateful for his support. She had never expected to find someone like him, someone who didn't judge her for her past, someone who cared for her despite everything. She had feared that by leaving her people, she would be left with nothing. But here she was, standing with Jack, and for the first time, she felt like she had a future. "I'm not alone," Lyra repeated, her heart swelling with gratitude. "And for the first time in my life, I don't feel like I have to fight alone." Jack reached out, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to fight anymore, not by yourself." They stood there for a few moments, just watching the stars above them. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful, like the calm after a storm. Lyra had always been taught to fight to survive, but now, in this moment, she realized that survival wasn't just about fighting. It was about finding peace, finding a place where you could be at ease, where you could heal. The next morning, the sun rose over the horizon, casting a warm, golden light over the frozen landscape. Lyra and Jack spent the day together, tending to the cabin, collecting firewood and making repairs. It felt like any other day, but to Lyra, it felt like a new beginning. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was building a life. That evening after dinner, they sat by the fire. The soft crackling of the flames the only sound in the room. Lyra felt a sense of calm settle over her. She had made the right choice, even if it hadn't been easy. Had chosen to leave behind the chaos, to leave behind the fighting, and to start fresh. She had chosen Jack, and for the first time in a long time, she was certain it was the right decision. Jack, Lyra said softly, breaking the silence. Thank you for everything. I never imagined I'd find someone like you. Jack looked up, his face softening. You don't need to thank me. I'm just doing what anyone would do. No, Lyra replied, shaking her head. Not everyone would do what you did. You saved me, Jack, and not just from the cold. You saved me from myself. Jack smiled gently. I didn't save you. You saved yourself, Lyra. You made the choice to walk away from everything you knew. You chose peace. Lyra felt a wave of emotion rise in her chest. She had spent so many years fighting, so many years trapped in a cycle of war and violence. But here, with Jack, she had found something new. Something worth fighting for, but in a different way. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about living. The days turned into weeks, and the world outside remained as cold as ever. But inside the cabin, Lyra and Jack built something together. They grew closer, sharing stories and dreams, finding comfort in each other's company. The world outside might have been harsh and unforgiving, but here, in this small cabin, they created their own warmth. Lyra knew that there would always be challenges ahead. The Calorian fleet might return, and when they did, she would be ready. But she also knew that she had Jack by her side. Together, they could face anything. Together, they could create a life free from fear, free from the past that had followed. For all these years, the future was uncertain. But for the first time, Lyra felt hopeful. She had found a new beginning, not just in the world, but in herself. And with Jack, she knew that no matter what came next, she wouldn't be alone.